Thanks to Honor for sponsoring this video. This is arguably the best looking laptop on the planet right now in the Honor MagicBook Art 14, with it having a crazy 97% screen to body ratio, while also being one of the thinnest and lightest laptops on the market. It weighs in at just barely over a kilogram or 2.2 pounds, while measuring in at just 1 centimeter at its thinnest point. Now, obviously it's a tapered design, so it does get thicker towards the back, but even then, it's right there with the MacBook Air, while still managing to squeeze in a full-sized HDMI and USB port, in addition to the 2 USB-C ports you get on the other side, which is all you get on the MacBook Air. Now, the way Honor was able to pull this design off is in 2 ways. The first is they're using lighter materials across the board. So instead of aluminum for the body, they're using magnesium alloy, and then for the keyboard, they're using titanium alloy. So that way you get the strength, like with there being no flex on here, without the added weight. And the net result is you get a laptop that is a full 200 grams less than the MacBook Air. That's a whole iPhone 16 Plus's worth of weight, which is really impressive given that the MacBook Air is already incredibly light. And then in order to get the bezels as thin as they did, the webcam isn't on the screen. It's actually stored inside of the laptop itself, where you can just pop it out and mount it right onto the top of the lid. It's super fast at connecting, and while the quality of the image won't win any awards, it doesn't support HDR and it's only 2 megapixels, the 1080p resolution is fine for video calls, while also having the benefit of being reversible. So if you're on a call, you can just flip it over like that and then show someone around. And then obviously when you don't need it, which is the majority of the time, you could just stow it away with the extra benefit of not having like a camera always looking at you. It gives you a sense of privacy. Plus, obviously, this fully uninterrupted display, which let's talk about because the screen on here is really what makes it stand out. So the bezels are only 2.2 millimeters thick. And luckily, Honor is also using a solid panel on here. So it's an OLED where you get those deep blacks and vibrant colors. It's bright, with it matching the brightness of the MacBook Air's LCD in our global brightness test, and it's sharp with a 3120 by 2080 resolution. The screen size on here is technically 14.6 inches diagonally, although because it's taller due to not having that top bezel, it has a 3:2 aspect ratio, where you end up getting more vertical space, which I think helps take your productivity up a notch without actually having a notch. But maybe the biggest difference between something like this and the MacBook Air, which I keep referring to the MacBook Air since it's arguably one of its biggest competitors, especially at this footprint, is the screen is 120 Hertz instead of the MacBook's 60 Hertz, which, hey, not everyone can see the difference between 60 and 120, but at least for me, it's super noticeable anytime I'm scrolling or moving windows around. And then last 2 things I want to say about the display is, one, it's a touchscreen, so you could actually have a whole other way of interacting with it beyond the keyboard and trackpad. And then 2, it extends out a lot. It goes out a full 150 degrees, which is way more than the 132 degrees that I'm used to with the MacBook. But the display is only part of the story, at least when you're watching a movie or playing games on here, with the speakers arguably being just as important. And despite its super lightweight and thin profile, Honor was still able to fit in a 6-speaker sound system, which outside of the MacBook Air, you don't really see a whole lot with this ultra thin and light form factor. So there are 4 woofers and 2 tweeters in the setup, and they sound pretty good, with them being both loud and being full. Just take a listen to how it compares to the MacBook. So I would say that the MacBook Air has a little bit more at the low end, at least when we did our full audio suite, but it's not something I really noticed when I was listening to music on here, with the Honor being a little bit louder. But again, they were so close that I wasn't really noticing it, with it being really hard to pick one over the other. Now, in terms of the keyboard, the MagicBook has this nice 1.5 millimeters of key travel. The board doesn't flex really with it having that titanium, and the haptic trackpad on here is just gigantic. I think it's the biggest one I've ever ever seen on a laptop, to the point where Honor's added extra features to take full advantage of it. So you can set it to where a click on the top left of the trackpad minimizes the window, a click at the top right will close it, along with some gestures that you can do along the edges where you can adjust the brightness and the volume. Although for those edge gestures, I ended up turning them off because the haptics were just a little bit too strong for my liking. Like, take a listen. That's just not the most pleasing sound to hear. So I turned them off and they're available on the keyboard anyways. But for the main trackpad, you could adjust the haptic level where I actually set it to low where I found it to be just right. All right, but moving on, under the hood, the MagicBook is powered by the Snapdragon X Elite chip with a pretty big 60 watt-hour battery. So, battery life is one of those areas where you expect this laptop to really outperform. And at least compared to the MacBook Air, where, Apple has been known for their power efficiency, this thing is very competitive. In our video playback test, where we had each laptop's display calibrated to 200 nits, with the speakers also calibrated to the nearest decibel count, despite having a bigger screen with like 15 square inches of more screen real estate, the MagicBook was able to last a full hour and 16 minutes longer. The MacBook did redeem itself in the browser test, where we cycled through the same set of websites every 30 seconds, where the MacBook lasted 49 minutes longer in that test, and then in the gaming test, where we had each laptop run endlessly in Minecraft, making sure to cap the frame rate so that way we didn't have one laptop do more work than the other, the Honor was able to outlast the Mac by 21 minutes. So, overall, they are really close when it comes to battery life. And if anything, the edge goes to the MagicBook, especially considering that in our 30-minute charge test, the Honor went from 0 to 40% compared to the MacBook's 26%. Now, in terms of performance, that Snapdragon X Elite chip has been able to handle pretty much anything I've thrown at it. In Cinebench, while the latest M3 powered MacBook Air did score 26 points higher in the single-core benchmark, in multi-core, the Snapdragon scored higher by 179 points, which I think is most likely thanks to its higher core count, plus the fact that this thing has fans at the bottom, unlike the MacBook Air. We also did a mini speed test using our custom robot mouse rig, where we found that there was virtually no difference in Chrome, at least across the two web pages that we loaded that had 3D models, with them being nearly identical. In Photoshop, while the Art 14 was able to launch into the app faster, the Mac was faster across the different edits that we did. So, they do go back and forth, but at least for the stuff that I do on a laptop, which, for me, mainly consists of like Chrome, Notion, Slack, a little bit of Photoshop and like some ChatGPT, I've been pretty happy with the performance coming out of this thing. And then for gaming, it actually did better than I was expecting it to do, with our tests finding an average of over 80 FPS in Rocket League, 120 frames per second in Minecraft, and 59 FPS in Counter-Strike 2, which, obviously they weren't set to the maximum settings on here since the resolution on the screen is so high, but still, even at the settings that we ran it at, it's not bad for a laptop that weighs a kilogram. Now, because this laptop is powered by the new ARM-based Snapdragon X Elite chip, not every Windows app is gonna run on here natively, at least not yet, since Windows is very much still in a transition phase. But with emulation, most of the things that you want are gonna work just fine. And Honor does do a good job at transcoding x86 apps to ARM, where they're able to run both fast and efficiently. That said though, if you are considering switching to a Snapdragon X Elite laptop like this, I would look into the apps that you use on a day-to-day basis just to make sure that they work 100%. For me, it's been fine, no problem, but you don't want to end up with an app that you absolutely rely on not running the way that you'd expect. But if it doesn't, Honor still does offer the Art 14 in an Intel-based option, which is pretty nice. With the Snapdragon, of course, you're getting that top-notch battery life, along with full support for all the new AI applications, including Microsoft's Copilot and Honor's Magic Ring, where the laptop will seamlessly connect with other Honor devices, letting you easily drag and drop files between them. You can actually have the Magic V3 act as a second screen for the laptop, or you can even move the cursor from the Windows desktop over to your Android phone, which means you can leverage the tech across your devices. For example, if you make an image using Copilot and Paint, and then later on you decide that you want to remove something, you can actually use the AI Magic Eraser on the Magic V3 straight from the laptop. It's pretty cool. We actually did a whole video talking about it on the channel, but in short, it's the kind of integration that makes being in the Honor ecosystem feel super convenient. But yeah, that's the MagicBook Art 14 Snapdragon. I'd say it's definitely one of the most compelling laptops out there right now, since, it ticks a lot of the checkboxes you want in this form factor, where you get that 120Hz OLED screen, you get a 6-speaker sound system, you get excellent battery life, a nice keyboard and trackpad, some actually decent I/O, while all fitting in this body that's super light and super thin. But anyways, that is it for me in this video. Big thanks to Honor for sponsoring it. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, I'll see you in the very next episode.